So today's special speaker, I always learn something from Reverend Brian. His talk is Faith, Seen with Spiritual Eyes. I missed the eyes part, I think, the other day. So, the Reverend Brian Walker.
Good morning. So I'm guessing that you all probably know that I have a cartoon collection. Really? Thousands. So here's a little quiz. I just want to know as the pastor that you're paying attention. So, in this month's newsletter, there was a cartoon, actually a couple of cartoons. It was about Mother's Day. So who saw it? All right, it's a beauty. So here's the image, and the caption reads, "Moms, like dads, only smarter." Okay, so you can use that next Sunday. Okay, next Sunday's Mother's Day. For today, one of my favorites is a billboard outside of Las Vegas that says, "Welcome to Las Vegas, a faith-based community." So it raises that question when we talk about faith, what is it that we mean? And so in our modern culture, when we think about faith, and actually if you look in a dictionary, it'll tell you. I'll read. This is from the American Heritage Dictionary. And this is a quote. "Belief that does not rest on logical proof or material evidence. Often in Christianity, the theological virtue defined as a secure belief in God." So that's what we think about in our modern culture, about what faith is. It's about believing in something that can't be proved. There's not evidence for that. And so it really turns belief, or turns faith, into very much of a head kind of matter. It's very rational. What is it that you believe? And based on Scripture and Christian tradition, that's not what faith is about. It's not about something that we think about rationally and that is a head matter. It's something that is very much associated with the heart. Traditionally, the heart was a metaphor for something that was far deeper than our head, far deeper than our emotions. It really stood for our entire being. It was really very all-encompassing. And so faith engaged all aspects of us, particularly the heart. And so we've taken that idea, this traditional idea, and reduced it to a way that, identifying as a person of faith can actually, be kind of a struggle. Sometimes, I know in the past it has been for me. After 20 plus years of being a minister now, I feel fairly comfortable with it. But faith is, in some quarters, pretty much ridiculed, being a person of faith, because they think that you believe in a lot of fairy tales. So I want to offer you something that is much bigger and much broader than that. And actually, it's already been mentioned today, but faith in the traditional way of thinking about it was much more about trust. What do you trust in? So it's about. Well, let me use this example from Scripture. You know, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Consider the birds of the air, and how God feeds them, and the lilies of the field, and how God clothes them in gorgeous splendor." He then asks his hearers several times, "Why do you worry, you of little faith?" And concludes, "Therefore, do not worry." So it's about an invitation to see the natural world, to embrace even our adventures of unfaith as possibilities for us to see things in a bigger way. That we can actually trust that the universe is unfolding in a way that does have a divine order to it, even if we have difficulty seeing it in the moment. So, another aspect of a traditional way of thinking about faith is faithfulness. So, are we faithful? You know, in the Jewish scriptures, you know, there's always a covenant between God and the chosen people. Can you keep that covenant? Can you be faithful? Can you commit to this? Can you be loyal? And then in the Gospels, Jesus says, "Follow me." Not just following him literally, but metaphysically, follow the Christ in yourself. That there is a divine path. You have access to it. Stay faithful to it. Very important. So I want to offer you a definition of faith. And this is a takeaway, okay? So those of you who are taking notes, physically or mentally, this is one of your takeaways from today. A definition of faith: consciousness centered in universal source, or if you prefer, or God. Consciousness centered in universal source. I like it. So trust, faithfulness, and faith as a way of seeing. You know, at one point in the scriptures, Jesus says, "Do you have eyes and do not see?" It's because when you see through the eyes of faith, it is a different way of seeing the world than with our literal visual eyes. So I want to tell you about someone who I came across recently and was surprised to see this person as somebody that I thought, wow, that is great faith. And so on PBS recently, there is a special, short series, on Henry David Thoreau. I recommend it. And so I was just so impressed with his life and his ideas, and I saw him as the quintessential example of someone who is spiritual but not religious. So Thoreau lived in the middle part of the 19th century, 1800s, 30s, 40s, 50s, into the 60s. And he lived in Concord, Massachusetts, which is about 20 miles out of Boston. And he was part of a movement that we call transcendentalism, which I'm guessing is a term you may have heard. Transcendentalism was a huge influence on New Thought, religious science, unity, and it is most often identified with somebody who's at least as well known, probably more well known, at least in New Thought circles, and that's Ralph Waldo Emerson. There's even a New Thought school called the Emerson Institute. Anyway, so this transcendentalism is an intellectual and literary movement that emphasized intuition, individual conscience, nature, self-reliance, and the idea that truth could be found through personal experience rather than only through reason, tradition, and organized religion. And it was in its flower and its heyday in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s. And it was a reaction against this strict idea of rationalism and social conformity of the time. So transcendentalism, Thoreau, Emerson, these are two of the major players in this movement. So now Thoreau, of course, knew Emerson. They were friends. Emerson was a little bit older, so he was kind of a mentor to Thoreau. And Thoreau actually spent a couple of extended periods of time living in the Emerson household. Thoreau graduated from Harvard. He took a teaching position, but a couple of weeks into the job, his supervisor told him that he needed to use corporal punishment to manage the class. And Thoreau, who thought that education should be more joyful and more harmonious, he immediately resigned his position. Because that really went against who he was, what his values were, and what he stood for. Now, one of the things about Thoreau that you probably know is that he was fascinated by the natural world. He would have loved our congregational songs this morning. The Hawaiian "Thank You for the Earth and the Sky," and the other song we sung, "Thank You for this day, Spirit, thank you for the earth," because he had those characteristics that we commonly see in little kids who can sit there and watch an anthill just for a long time and just be totally enthralled with this. I mean, he had this childlike curiosity and sense of awe his entire life. And so it was one of the things that he was most dedicated to was the natural world and seeing that there was this order and this universal kind of spirit that he was really connected to. So he was also a dedicated journalist and an author. He wrote several books. So his first book was called A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. It was kind of a travelogue that he took with his brother, and so again, him being an inveterate kind of observer and journalist and writer, he wrote this book. And since it was his first book, the publisher was going to be taking a risk publishing this book. And so Thoreau, being the kind of character that he was, he said, "Hey, whatever you don't sell, I'll buy from you." Well, he was kind of introducing this style of writing that it was a little bit different at the time. It was kind of a travelogue and what we would call a kind of scientific research, but he was a naturalist. And so there was all this stuff about nature. And he saw this morality and spirituality into it as well. So there was a lot of philosophy and spirituality as well. And it was new to people, and very importantly, because one of the hallmarks of the Transcendentalists is they were very open to other traditions. They read a lot of scripture from the Far East. And so there were ideas in there that suggested that Christianity may not be the only or even the highest form of seeking the truth. And of course, that really rubbed a lot of his readers the wrong way, even members of his own family. So of the 1,000 books that were published, over 700 didn't sell. So he, of course, honored his word and he bought those books. And characteristic of him, he logged in his journal, he says, I now have a library of over 900 books, over 700 of which I've written myself. And it took him several years to make up that money that it cost him to buy all those books. Now, so one of the things that Thoreau is most well known for is he viewed life as an experiment, and as part of that experiment, he built a little cabin on some property that Emerson owned, a couple of miles out of Concord, at Walden Pond. And he lived there for a couple of years. And out of that experience, and of course he's journaling and looking at nature, and he was very rigorous about how he would go and he would measure the ice. He'd go to different parts of the woods and in different times of the year and different years, and make all these notes about how things have changed. And so his intention with this experiment was to make sure that he lived fully, that life was not going to pass him by. And so it was an idea of simple living, of self-reliance, and close observation of nature. And so out of all of this, he wrote a book, and he titled it Walden. And it was something that he worked on and rewrote several times, so he didn't publish it for about 10 years. But again, the initial reception was kind of lukewarm. Some people kind of liked the writing, but it really didn't do all that well. Today, of course, it is widely regarded as a classic of American literature, and is taught in high school and universities everywhere. And so here are a few of the ideas that he presents in this book. He says, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately. So it's a very powerful kind of intention, that he wants to live very consciously. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. You may have heard that quote before. And so he, in living in a very conscious kind of way, he becomes aware that there are a lot of people that really live in very mechanical kind of ways and follow what the current fashion is, whatever that is, the current way of thinking, and really, to his way of thinking, don't really embrace their full potential. He writes, if a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Again, I'm sure that's a metaphor that you have heard before, that we march to different drummers. And so let's honor that in each other, that we all have this potential and we all bring it forth in different ways. He writes, if you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. So the invitation is to have our dreams and our imaginings and then to make it happen, which is what he did. So Thoreau was someone who had a very strong sense of his own moral nature and his belief that we all have the potential when we do some self-reflecting and we explore who we truly are, that we have ideas of what it is that we should be doing that are better than other things to do. And so this was at a time, of course, when slavery was a hugely controversial issue. in this country, and he was a strong abolitionist. So he was one of the primary movers and speakers in the Boston area, especially in his little town of Concord, about supporting the abolition movement. And he went further, and because of the Mexican-American War that was going on at that time, which he saw basically as a land grab, and slavery, which he did not support, he didn't pay part of his tax, because he said, if this is what my government is doing, and I'm a part of this government, I don't want to support that. And of course, he got thrown in jail. And so there's a story that he's in jail because of making this protest. And Ralph Waldo Emerson comes to visit him and says, "Henry, what are you doing in there?" And Henry says, "Ralph, what are you doing out there?" Because that was his view. In an unjust society, if people are imprisoning people unjustly, the place for a just person was in prison. It's kind of a radical thought. So based on this experience, he wrote an essay, again, something else, something that you're probably all familiar with or have heard about, called Civil Disobedience. Because he very much believed in his own faith, in that he was guided to do what was right for him, and not just to follow what everybody else was doing. And of course, again, it didn't have real widespread kind of circulation initially, but of course it went on to influence people like Mahatma Gandhi in India, Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement in the United States. So again, it was something that came from his own mind and his ideas that was really seminal and had tremendous influence on all of our lives. So Thoreau, unfortunately, like so many people at that time, he died young at age 44 of tuberculosis. But he had a view of death that was very consistent with his view of the natural world and how there was this order and how there was this natural spirituality. And he wrote about leaves that would fall from the trees, and that they would be the fertilizer for what grew up in the spring. And he's reported to have had a very peaceful death surrounded by his family, and was a spirit that who died way too young. So, what did Thoreau have faith in? What did he have faith in? Faith, remember, is the way I'm thinking about it is consciousness centered in universal source, or God. So he had faith. He had faith in the goodness of people. He had faith that we all had the potential to live meaningful lives in a way that was very special for each one of us. He had faith in personal experience and intuition being a guide for us and how we decide what is truth, as opposed to organized religion, or again, what everybody else is doing and thinking. He had faith that there was a divine order and an infused spirit in the natural world around him. And if he could be present to that in a very deep way, that was something that was very sacred. And that's the way he lived his life. He believed in a sense of his own individual conscience and everybody's conscience, and how that has a higher priority than just what everybody else is doing. So how's your faith? How's your faith? Consciousness centered in universal source, or God. So, In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. Woo. Part of our mission statement says that we are living the unlimited possibilities of spirit. So I invite you to step into that. Living the unlimited possibilities of spirit. So you might say, but Pastor, but if my faith is so powerful, why don't I just, faith all this stuff because I've got the trust and the faithfulness and the vision and I can do this. So two big kind of caveats or conditions. One is you need to act. Friends, you need to act. You have to act on your faith. Like Thoreau says, we have these visions. You have to put the foundation underneath them. And acting takes intention. It takes courage. But you can do it. So I learned something from my wife this week that I want to share with you. This was something that she learned from her mother. All right? And it's this. This is what her mother taught her. Good habits make you, bad habits break you. And for some reason, that has really resonated with me. And I keep thinking about that when I'm doing something, when I'm about to, follow my YouTube and, kind of just get carried away on that. Good habits make you, bad habits break you. When I'm about to have that second piece of pie, do I really need this one? Good habits make you, bad habits break you. So I invite you to, if that resonates with you, to allow that to help you to be able to act on your faith and to be able to express your faith in an even more powerful way than it does now. So now the second thing is, and this is really important, that even though your faith is limitless, it can only extend to the self-imposed boundaries of your present consciousness. It can only extend to the self-imposed boundaries of your present consciousness. So, if there's a part of you, either conscious or unconscious, that thinks, I really couldn't lose that weight. Or this is something I really can't do. Or I really don't deserve, to be a prosperous person. If there is that kind of energy in your consciousness, you are creating a self-imposed kind of boundary that you can't get beyond, okay? And so that is something very important to be aware of. So when we look at Jesus could do things that we see as miraculous, but he had a consciousness that was as big as it needed to be. It was limitless. And so his faith, and when he talks about faith, it does have that power, but don't limit yourself. So, when we talk about consciousness, I want to say a word about that, because in general conversation, what we generally think about is being awake, being aware of our thoughts and emotions, our feelings. And so that's what we think about in consciousness. When we think about it in a more spiritual or metaphysical way, we think about it as something about an inner awakening that knows or that can know the truth our capacity to transcend our ordinary self and connect to a larger spiritual reality. So when we talk about consciousness and we talk about expanding our consciousness, those are the things that we want to do. That is, to have a greater sense of awareness of our inner life, to realize that we can transcend this sense that my ego is my total being, that we can create a witness to watch what I do that isn't totally bound up in that this is me, and that also to make a connection to our higher source. Okay? And so we can do all those things, and we can exercise the power of faith in ever greater ways. Okay? Good habits make you, bad habits break you. Let's breathe. You can do it. You can do it, friends. Little by little. Okay, so when we talk about faith, and again, we're talking about consciousness in universal source or God. I wouldn't be betting on Vegas. All right? There are sure things, and you can prove it to yourself. Because faith is not just a matter for the head, it's a matter for the heart and your whole being. It's not just a matter of belief of what you believe in, but it's a matter of trust, of faithfulness, of vision. What do you see? How do you see the world? Good habits make you, bad habits break you. Okay, so here's a vision of a way that you can see of seeing the world. This is seeing my idea of seeing the world through spiritual eyes. Okay, and so I want to finish up here with an affirmation. And so it's about having faith that your soul's journey is divinely guided, okay? And once you get aligned with your higher self, that higher power, you can get in touch with that guidance and you can follow it. All right, so let's say this together. Together, I have faith that my soul's journey is divinely guided, okay? And I encourage you to have faith in that. So let's do it one more time with more feeling. Together, I have faith that my soul's journey is divinely guided. Okay? So that's a takeaway. And then I want to take it one step more. Okay? Yeah. So that we as a community have divine guidance and that we are following that. Together, I have faith that our spiritual communities divinely guided. All right, one more time with feeling. Together, I have faith that our spiritual community is divinely guided. And we do, and we are. Bless you.